I learned really, really young that the way to make true friends was to share something private about yourself. I think that the more times your patience is tested, the more patience you have. It says old man Kant is dead. I helped bury him. This fearless, people talk about being fearless, right? And I realized that I was completely wrong in what that meant for the first half of my life. I'm also a firm believer in influencing others in a positive way. And I don't think you need to be best friends with everyone. But I think that letting a relationship naturally grow into something that you didn't know was there is kind of rewarding.
All right, welcome to the Rad Dad Podcast. This is episode 19. I have my good friend Andrew Goodwin here. Did I catch you off guard when I called you and invited you to the podcast?
A little bit, yeah.
It was only 2 days ago.
Yeah,
and you said, yeah, let's do it. So
yeah.
Thanks for being on. Just to start off, tell me a little bit about your childhood, like where you grew up. I don't know that we've ever really talked about that, like where you grew up and some highlights of your childhood.
Yeah, I grew up in Orem. I was born in Provo. And we moved around a bit just because my parents were divorced a lot. Lots of different moms and dads, different pasts, different experiences from that, but just kind of grew up around here, Springville, Provo, Orem. My family's originally from Michigan, so
okay,
have some good ties there.
Yeah.
But so just around here mostly.
Did you recognize that like moving around was different, or was it just kind of like the thing your family did? And
yeah, it was it was just normal. I mean, I think for me, like I didn't really have any close friends when I was young because I wasn't around long enough to have them.
Yeah.
And I, like every other weekend, I was with my dad for that weekend. And so, you just didn't even realize that you weren't doing what other kids were doing, because it was just normal for you.
Yeah. So. Did you recognize at a young age, like, I don't have friends, or was it just kind of like,
yeah, it was, my mom, it's funny because I remember my childhood. I remember being very shy and not like really outgoing because I never really had close friends. And so I always felt a little bit insecure about having friends. But my mom, the way she describes my childhood was that I would like, every time we moved into a new town, I would like go knock on doors and say, hey, she told this story when I was a kid all the time that I would go, as soon as we would unpack, the very first thing I would do is go knock the neighbors' houses and ask if they had any friends my age. And that just didn't sound like me, which I thought was really interesting because from my perspective, I never had close friends. And so I wasn't comfortable that way, right? Like I didn't feel like, I have all these friends or I'm a good social person.
Yeah.
I actually felt like I wasn't good socially, but from her perspective, because I was so outgoing, I was. And so that was pretty interesting for me to identify that.
So what did you do to fill your free time?
I built a lot of forts, spent a lot of time outside. I'd go steal wood off of construction sites. At first I would just steal the scrap wood out of the garbage, and then I'd wait until they left and go take the full pieces of wood. After a while it evolved, right? And we built some pretty intricate forts. But mostly just outdoor stuff. I'd go hike or just kind of get out,
And then so you got into athletics, right? Was that at a young age, or was it more into junior high school?
Actually, so you don't know this about me, but when I was younger, I really enjoyed sports, but I was never able to play them. My stepdad wouldn't let me play sports. He said they were a waste of time, so he would make me work at his store, and then he would pay me a paycheck each week or each month or whatever, and then he would take like rent and food out of it and give me like $5 at the end.
What?
So he wouldn't let me play sports.
What age are we talking? I
was like 8 or 9. So
you're over here paying rent at 8 years old.
Yeah. But, I don't know why he did that. What's really interesting about that is he was really hard on me, that stepdad that I had, and pushed me really hard to work, but he didn't do that to his own kids, because he loved them so much. He couldn't do that to him. He couldn't do it the same way. And what's really interesting is the differences in how we've turned out. So it's almost like he didn't mean to, but he showed me more love and taught me more things.
Kind of tough love.
Yeah. Because it really taught me how to work at a young age. But to answer your question, I actually couldn't catch a football. Like I didn't know how to catch a ball because I didn't have a dad to throw one to me. And so, one time I was playing on the playground with the kids and said to my best friend, his name was Trevor Clark, I said, man, why don't you ever pass me the ball? He says, because you won't catch it. And I thought that was really hard for me, because, I hated being the person no one wanted around, but I mean, they were still my friends, don't get me wrong, but they just knew I didn't have those abilities. And so I actually didn't start playing sports until like the first year of high school was when I started playing. So luckily I was athletic. And so it came on really quick, and I was okay. But mostly just did extreme sports when I was younger because I was out and about. I was riding bikes and doing jumps and things that I could do on my own in my free time, not organized sports.
So what was your attraction to sports at an older age? Did you just want to be included, or?
No, I just loved always as a young kid. I just always loved playing sports. I liked the pain of it. I liked the challenge of it, and I just like being active. And sports is a good way to think strategy and have a good time while doing it,
Yeah.
So I don't know. I guess I was just born that way, but I just enjoy being physical.
Yeah.
And moving. I'm not one that likes to, I mean, when I used to tell my mom, I just want to learn to catch. Can you just throw the ball to me for a minute? And she never had time because she was working. So, I don't know. It was just something I always wanted. Maybe it was TV shows that I was watching, or maybe it was just movies, or maybe I just thought it was cool.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I remember at a young age, like there were certain things that I didn't think were cool that other kids did. But for some reason I was always drawn to sports. I just really enjoyed them. So.
Yeah. The reason I ask you those questions about sports is because your family now with your wife and kids, you guys are super active.
Yeah.
So, was that something that you always had an idea in the back of your mind? Like, when I'm a dad, I'm going to make sure our family is athletic and we're active. And
yeah. So, I don't know if it so much was a plan. It was definitely a plan to be different from my parents in that way. Like I wanted to give my kids opportunity. I wanted them to do sports and have a good time.
Yeah.
What I didn't want to do was, I wanted them to have a good work ethic. I actually appreciated my stepdad teaching me how to work at a young age because I recognized that he wasn't doing it maliciously, right? I recognized that my stepdad, as much as it wasn't a labor of love either, like he didn't love me. That's not why he was doing it. But he also wasn't doing it because he hated me. He was just doing it because that's how he thought. He was just a rough guy. I mean, when he was 8 years old, he had a paper route and bought his own horse. And he was the only one in his family that owned a color television, including his parents. So it's not like he didn't do it to himself. You know what I mean? But for me, sports is just something that really builds confidence. It really builds the ability to talk to other people, communicate in tough ways. I think that there's a lot of lessons to be learned in sports that not having them in my life, learning to lose, for example, learning to win.
Yeah.
Those are things that you can't learn any other way. And when you don't see that as a child, you recognize that you don't have those talents, right?
Yeah.
So there, a story about me is, when I wrestled in high school, I was a really good wrestler, but mentally I was terrible. I just didn't have the experience that other kids had because I started so late. And so, had phenomenal coaches, had the ability to win. And I went to a tournament once and I wrestled against a kid that was really highly ranked and I didn't know who he was. And I just destroyed him. But then I'd go wrestle against a kid that I knew was a wrestler. I knew his family was a wrestling family and wasn't as good as this kid. And I would lose because it was all mental.
Yeah.
And so that to me is a good thing for the kids to learn. And so, but mostly it's just, coincidence. I think my wife and I like being outdoors and it's been fun. I've really, really enjoyed working with my daughter. She decided to drop out of a couple classes. She told me, "Hey Dad, I want to be a pro pickleball player." And I said, "All right, it's a lot of work. It's up to you though. You make the decision. If you make the decision, I'll make it work. I'm not going to force you to do it, but if you want to do it, I'll support you in that." And so she chose to drop out of a few classes every day, and I go drill with her every day, and work with her. And she's growing really, really fast. And that's just super fun to watch, but she just loves it. And I don't know what exactly that is. Because it's not like she plays basketball, she plays pickleball, she plays all these things. And when her friends come over, they're like, hey, what do you want to do? And they never turn on the Nintendo. They're like, let's go to the church and shoot hoops. And to me, that's funny that that's what my daughter is choosing to do, because she's not like a tomboy either. You know what
Especially
I mean?
in today's day and age, man. There's so many distractions and kind of easy things, just to, it's easy to sit on the couch and veg.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's pretty cool.
But I think getting out there and putting in hard work has its benefits. I've noticed, at least in my life, if I go on vacation for more than 5 days, I start to feel like crap. I start to feel a little bit depressed.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I'm the same way.
So I just can't. 5 days is too much. It's like, okay, I need to go do something productive. Yeah. That builds my self-worth. And I think sports, for her at least, does that.
Yeah. How old is she?
She's 13.
Yeah. And she's made, that's a big decision for a 13-year-old and a big commitment.
Yeah.
But that's pretty ambitious.
And it's interesting to see like the trials that we're having with that, right? Like she wants to play every day, every waking moment, but she woke up about a week ago and she's like, Dad, I can't feel my arm. And I was like, crap, I'm pushing her too hard. Like, you know, and so that's an interesting hurdle for us to try and figure out, like, okay, let's make sure you're not sleeping on that side. Let's do some massages. Let's do some stretching. But it's just interesting to see like the different things that kind of come of it. But mostly I'm just happy with her work ethic. She has been great that way. One of the things that I actually believe in wholeheartedly is with my kids, we noticed at a young age, they would ask for things at the store. Hey, Dad, buy me this. Hey, Dad, buy me this. Hey, I want this. Mm-hmm. And I said, you can buy it with your own money and I'll give you ways to earn that money. And that became my standard response was, if you want to spend your money on it, you can. And there's definitely times that I buy for them. Yeah. But it's interesting how quickly they've all grabbed that philosophy and now they ask for jobs to make money rather than ask for the item. And I sense that in her sport, and it's carrying over into her attitude with sports is like, okay, if I want this, I got to earn it. Yeah. You know, I can't, there's no cheating. And I think there's a lot of that right now in the world. A lot of people trying to take credit for or be unique online and be like special, but they're not doing anything special. Yeah. You know,
like who are you without Instagram?
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Are you really doing any of these things? Like, what are you doing of value? Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And some of the most popular right now, YouTubers and that, you know, I look at it and I'm just like, okay, it's a cool idea, but it's not really giving back to the world. Yeah. You know, it's not real value. Yeah. Some of them are. Some of them are pretty cool. Right. But I don't know.
So can you remember like the first time you seriously thought about fatherhood and like what type of dad you wanted to be?
Yeah. I remember thinking about, I don't know exactly when it was. Mm-hmm. I know I was pretty young, so this is strange, but I used to lay in bed and think through the day because things just didn't seem right. Things just they didn't add up. And I'd always lay in bed and I'd always like scratch my own shoulder. Like just, I'd like sit there in bed and I just kind of go like this and think, you know? And I remember one night I was sitting there in bed. I was probably 6 years old, 7 years old, maybe 8, I don't know, somewhere around that age. And I realized that the reason why my past didn't make any sense is because one or both of my parents were lying. And that realization was
You realized that at 7 years old?
Yeah. I realized that something was off. And then, but it took me, you know, a year of thinking about it every night. Like, man, what do I do? You know, why does this not make sense? Why is Dad saying he wants me to go live with him and all of these things, but my mom's saying different things? Like it literally didn't even hit me that one of them was lying. But then all of a sudden one night I remember distinctly that realization coming to me. It was a big turning point in my life. I think that's why I remember it. Because to me, it was like, okay, I still love them. Like, I remember that was my follow-up thought right after that was, they're not perfect, but I still love them. but being free from trying to piece everything together and just realize that I need to be who I want to be, and it didn't matter, was a big deal for me at a young age.
Some people go their whole lives without realizing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's crazy that you learned that at such a young age.
Well, I wish my brothers would have learned that sooner, because I still some of my brothers 20 years older are struggling with how to piece together the truth, you know?
So at what point did you really start constructing like what type of dad you wanted to be, and what were some of the tools that you wanted in your tool belt?
So that was actually the first, that night, to answer, because I forgot about your question. I apologize. But that night I realized that no matter what, I wanted to tell my kids the truth. And I always wanted to take responsibility for my mistakes, even if it meant acknowledging to my kids that I wasn't perfect. That was like my first, like, okay, I want to be that kind of dad.
Yeah.
And I think just being in a broken home and seeing other kids succeed and have help and all of that, I wanted to give that to my kids. And I always wanted a family, even at a young age. It's something I just wanted. So to be a good dad was a natural next thought for that, to try and be a good dad.
Yeah.
And I think I'm doing a pretty good job. I think I have my weaknesses, but and I work on them. I try and work on them, and try and recognize them, most of all, because sometimes we don't even know what we're doing wrong.
Yeah.
You know,
that can be more frustrating.
Yeah.
Just trying to figure that part out.
Yeah. I remember my mom used to say something to me all the time. And then I got married, and about a year into our marriage, my wife said exactly the same thing to me. And my entire childhood, I was like, my mom's just wrong. She's just stupid. She doesn't get it. Yeah. And then my wife says exactly verbatim, you do this. All of a sudden I realized, okay, something's there. I don't know what it is, but I got to find it.
Yeah.
I got to find that right now. And I think that to me was like the first step, was like, okay, I'm going to be honest, and I'm going to be truthful about situations with my kids. And if I freak out, I'm going to be the first one to go in there and say, hey, I shouldn't have yelled, shouldn't have raised my voice. There's no reason for that. And I apologize. And that's created other problems as a parent, because now my kids feel overly willing to talk logically with me. And sometimes that's frustrating, but it's a better problem, I think, than the alternative.
Yeah. So. That's interesting. There's this thing I live by, and it's deciding who's in your corner and who's in your circle. So just to further explain that, like, you know, who's in your circle, that's people that you love, that are around you, but the people that are in your corner are the people that are willing to fight for you and die for you. And it's a lot smaller. I feel like from an outside perspective, you've done a very good job of defining that in your life. What does it mean to you, like the family you married into and how close they are?
Yeah. So for me, my in-laws are amazing. And, you know, in a lot of ways, my wife's grandfather is a mentor, you know, and my father-in-law is a mentor, but they just, seeing how a normal family should operate and the ability they have to fight for each other brings so much happiness, right? I always say that correct principles brings happiness, and there's no cheating that, right? Just like there's no cheating death, there's no cheating happiness, you know?
Yeah.
And people can fake it. People can pretend that they're happy. They can you know, say that they're happy or have happiness in short stints when they're doing certain things.
Yep.
But there's no cheating true happiness. And there's principles that you have to live by to have that. And that's what my in-laws have shown me is, you know, they're not perfect, and they have, but they're dang close, you know, and it's cool, because what that means to me is they're there for as much as they can be. They're honest in their communications. And just being part of this family with them has been really, really great, because their priority is the family.
Yeah.
Right? Like they, you know, it's not about money. It's not about making more money. It's not about being seen to be more righteous or being, you know, I just the things that matter to them are sincere. And I think that's a good lesson that they've taught me is put your priorities in the right order and make sure you honor that always. Yeah. You know?
I think this world could use a lot more sincerity. So when we find it, we should cling to it.
Right. Yeah.
So tell me these principles to fatherhood according to Andrew.
Yeah, I think for me, it's tell your kids you love them. Be open about your emotions, which means you have to face your emotions, right? But I would say be open with how you feel, good or bad. I would say number 2 is explain how you feel and own your mistakes and live in truth, right? Like live in truth is one of my mantras. What that means is recognize when you're doing something wrong. Like for example, I was late getting here tonight, but I think people that know me know that that's a common mistake that I have. And it's something that I'm trying to work on. But just recognizing that and saying, hey, I could be better in this area, is a mantra there. I think the other side of parenthood, the other element to that is to love your wife. I think that showing a good united front and showing how much you love your spouse just makes a difference. And I also think showing that on a regular basis so that your kids can see it, but also showing how you're willing to communicate with your wife and work things out. We don't try and hide our fights from our kids. We also try not to make those fights too aggressive or extreme, right? Yeah. But we show them that we can talk through it and we can have disagreements, but still love each other, right? And I mean, my kids weren't part of this conversation, but when my wife and I were first married, we'd get in a big fight and one of us would say, well, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? And it's like, well, I had to sit there and really think about it and live in truth. Here's a moment of that. And I had to say to myself, you want to stay married. You want to stay with this person because you love them. Right now you don't. Right now you're frustrated, but that doesn't change that this is the ideal person for you if you really add it up.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I finally said to my wife, one day we were fighting. I said, hey, we're never going to talk about that again. Because the truth is I always want to be with you. And anytime that comes up in a conversation, we're fighting. Well, what do you want to do? Well, are you mad at me? Do you love me still? Like, obviously spouses have those types of conversations. Like, how do you feel about me right now? You probably, my answer is always the same. I love you. I'm mad at you right now. Right.
Yeah.
And making that distinction, but showing your kids the different emotions that you're feeling and then how you work through them with your spouse, I think is huge. So a strong relationship, a truthful relationship built on priorities, right? I'm a firm believer that in any relationship, the truth has to be above their emotions. First, God first. Then they're second.
Yeah.
So
I still I feel like I'm still piecing together this puzzle of the balance between showing emotion, showing your emotions and showing your weaknesses. Do you just openly show that in front of your kids and wife, or do you feel the pressure? I feel the pressure to be the tough guy, and to be the rock. And it's I don't want to lay all my problems out on my wife or kids when they get older.
Yeah. But on the flip side of that, if they know what you're going through and they see how you're handling it, that's also a strength, right? Every time we watch a movie and it gets to an honorable part or a sad part or something where someone sacrifices for another, I'll usually tear up, right? And it's funny, but every single person in my family turns and looks.
They know.
Well, yeah. And my son will say, Dad's crying again. Is Dad crying? And he'll actually get up off the couch and run over and see. He's looking around to see if I'm crying.
But he already picks up on
that. Huh. But what's interesting to me is, one, why is that so fascinating?
Yeah.
It's because it allows them to be free. If I am, right? But two, how do they always know when? How do they always look at me at the right time?
Yeah.
Right when I'm about to tear up. It's because we catch on to those things, right? Being honorable, being truthful, being a good family, showing love or even mending a relationship, those types of stories in movies and stuff are what bring us together, and we all want to experience that on a regular basis. And so for me, it's just interesting. It's just as interesting their reaction to it as it is me showing it. You know what I mean? And I'm okay with that. I always have always lived, even at a young age. I learned really, really young that the way to make true friends was to share something private about yourself. Mm-hmm. And so like you'll probably even be able to look back and think about some of the first times that we met. I probably shared something that most people wouldn't share, but that was my trick to get you to share something. And I hate to call it a trick because that sounds like I'm trying to.
It's a strategy.
Yeah, it's a strategy. Yeah, there you go. But my strategy will be when I'm building relationships is first share something vulnerable, and second find common ground. That's how I build relationships. It's a very simple strategy.
I love that tactic. I think we talked about this before years ago, and it stuck with me. Could you share an example of like how you approach that? Because I think as men, like I'm 31 and I'm thinking like, man, it's kind of hard to like find new friends now. Like, what do? I just walk up to someone and say what's up,
Yeah. It's funny, but so usually this is gonna sound so tacky, but it's so true. But I'll usually approach someone and I'll usually smile and look them right in the eye, and then it's amazing how often that elicits a smile back, right?
Yeah.
And we used to hear about that as kids, like, hey, smile at people, it makes the world a better place. We've lost that in our society, right? And it's funny to me, you'll hear all these people say, oh, well, I just have a resting bitch face, right? Sorry, but that's what it's called. And I'm like, so you openly admit that and don't want to change it. Like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my entire life.
Mm-hmm. So I feel like very called out right now.
Yeah, but I mean, that's like a cop-out, right? Like, okay, so a problem, and instead of trying to solve it or be better at it, you're just going to say, well, that's just what I have. It's like, okay, yeah, good luck. And look, everyone does that in different areas of their lives, but that's part of living in truth. Like, that's a cop-out. Let's be honest about it. Mm-hmm. If you say something like that, like, well, I just have a mean face. It's like, no, you have a mean personality and it's coming out your face. That's really what's happening.
You're wearing it on your sleeve.
You're just wearing it on your sleeve. Or you're actually a really thoughtful person and you haven't taught yourself to trigger, I'm just thinking, let me tell someone I'm just thinking by smiling at them, that it has nothing to do with them. But we have so many signals to each other. So the first one is I usually smile at someone and then I'll make some sort of a comment like, hey, I like your shorts. Right? The other day I was walking down the store and this girl was walking down and she seemed like she was a little bit down. And I looked around and couldn't think of anything, and I saw her shoes were bright color and I said, I love that color on your shoes. It wasn't even really a compliment, mm-hmm. but it was like changed her whole body language for a minute, right? And that's big, I think. So first of all, just say something random to someone and smile. And then if they react good, great. We'll move on from there. If they don't, then maybe they're not ready yet. But then once we're talking about random things. I will just let the conversation kind of go and listen to them. And then when I find an opportunity to share something personal, I will. That's my next step. And then...
how personal are you talking?
Oh, I don't think anything's too personal except for if it's like gross or inappropriate, right?
Right, but like...
Yeah. Like, I'm not talking about someone who goes and is always talking about sex because they're so uncomfortable about it that they have to like try and act all tough about it. I'm not talking about those types of conversations. I mean something like, oh yeah, that's really hard. My dad died of cancer, right? Or
something personal.
Yeah, something personal, but not private, let's say. Right? But something, because people don't share even personal things.
No.
On a regular basis. No. But you can share, hey, I really struggle with this, or this is something that I'm having a hard time with. Something vulnerable, I guess I should say. Vulnerable would be a good way of wording it. Yeah. And then, I can't remember what that last step was. I mentioned it earlier, but...
common ground.
Yeah, common ground. Yeah. Then I'll just ask about what they like. Once I've shared something personal, now I can find common ground. So I'll say, what are you into? What are your hobbies? And I almost always say that. What do you do for fun? That's usually my line, is what do you like to do for fun? And it's funny, like, I talk to all these people and they're so unwilling to learn new things and enjoy new things. Right. But like, I've got a neighbor who I'm more different than anyone I know, but he's really into remote control airplanes. So I went and bought one so that I could fly with him when we were first in the ward. Haven't hung out with him since. Right. It's not like we're best friends, but every time I see him, he says hi.
Yeah.
And that's enough. That's enough for that relationship because we're just not compatible to be close friends, but we're definitely good enough to be friends.
So this is a genuine question. At our age, with everything going on in our lives, is it even worth making new friends?
Yeah.
And putting that energy into that, like, because I feel like I have my people, and why would I go make new friends?
Oh, that's a good question. I think so, because I don't think that you can ever have too many friends, right? And I think that I'm also a firm believer in influencing others in a positive way. And I don't think you need to be best friends with everyone. But I think that letting a relationship naturally grow into something that you didn't know was there is kind of rewarding, right? Like, I'll share a story, but there was this one guy in our ward, him. And I don't know if I'm supposed to share names or anything or if it matters, but super, super quiet hunter guy, right? Super athletic. And every time we would go to sporting events, it was almost like me versus him mentality. And I just felt this wall. I just felt this wall between him and I, right? Like, okay, you think you're pretty good. I think I'm pretty good. So naturally there's this barrier between us. And, it just took some time, but I found common ground. We started talking, the opportunity to present itself. And now we're very, very close, really, really close. And that friendship is different from all my other friendships in a unique way. And I really appreciate it because he's a good guy. He's a really good guy. I love him. And the timing was just right? Yeah. And so we became really good friends. But had I had that mentality of like, okay, this doesn't work, then that's not going to happen, right? And I think sometimes we kind of get into that mentality. I hear people in the church all the time, or friends of mine that says, well, I've got my family.
Yeah. You hear that a lot.
Yeah. You heard a lot. I'm just going to spend time with my family. It's like, literally, that's not the gospel at all. Like, Jesus didn't spend time just with his family. Like, almost in none of the stories are about him spending time with his family. I'm sure he did it a lot. I'm sure that was his priority, but that's not what we truly believe, right? Like, we believe in uplifting our brothers and sisters and being there with them. Mm-hmm. Right. And so to me, like, it's not a coincidence that those people that think that way are often the ones that feel the most alone and have issues with that. Like, man, I so they basically are saying, man, I wish I had more friends, but I don't really care. Yeah, you do. Yeah. But you just don't.
We're social beings.
Yeah, we are. And it's not bad to, like, my wife, she's really evolved in this area, right? Like, she used to have no friends. When we were first married, she would just say, man, girls are terrible. They're so hard to be friends with, blah, blah, blah. And now she's got this group of girls that she goes and hangs out with, and they go on trips and they do these things. And I could be the type of spouse that's like, oh man, I can't believe you're taking off on me. But I'd rather her go have a good time with her friends.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because they can give her something I can't. Mm-hmm. And there's so many elements of that. Like,
and I think you have it on your end too. You have a group of solid dudes that you go hang out with as well.
Yeah. And all of them are different, right? Like, I don't know. I have those friends that I really enjoy doing certain things with. And then there's others that I really like. We're just right now in a different space, right? And we just can't do it. And I've noticed, like, even in the last year, right? Like, the truth is right now, life feels like it's all about family because we got young kids.
Yeah.
And we're focused on that. But they're going to leave you pretty quick, right? Like, I tell my wife all the time, you better love me the most because they're going to leave you and I'm not,
Yeah.
So don't forget about that during this 15 years of where you do love them more. Because I get it. Like, you have a special attachment to your kids.
Yeah.
I have a philosophy that I describe the layers of love, right? Like the levels of love, you could call it. But when I was born, sure, I loved my mom. I loved my dad. And then I grew up more and I started loving someone else more than that, which became, I started trying to figure out how to love someone more than I love my parents. And so then I figured that out and I married someone. Took me a minute, but I graduated to the next level of love, right?
Yeah.
And then you have your first kid and you're like, okay, that's love. That's what love is. Unconditional, no barriers. Like this kid can't hurt me. He's 100%. He's half mine. He's half me.
Yeah.
Like it's love without fear, right? That's what I think kids do for you is they teach you. And I turned to my wife and I said, okay, I know now what I'm lacking in our relationship. And that is that I still have some walls up. I'm still keeping you at a different distance, even though we've been married for 7 years. Right? Like
having a kid made you realize that?
Yeah. Made me realize that I trusted my kid more than I trusted my wife. And it was holding us back from growing as a couple. Right? Does that make sense? And as soon as I could let that go and realize that the only way I could achieve a closer love with my wife was to be more vulnerable with her. In other words, allow her to be able to hurt me more if she ever did leave by taking those walls down and trusting her more and more was the only way I could get to the next level. And that to me was scary as heck because I was someone who came from a really hard background. Yeah. I didn't trust anyone, Yeah. And I mean, there's still the possibility she could leave. And if I fully commit to just loving her no matter what, even if she leaves, can I say that I would still love her? And I think right now I probably could. It would kill me. But could I still see the strengths of who she was before? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I just got to trust that she's going to keep trying to choose the right and I am too, and we'll be together forever.
Right.
And if that changes, it will be because of we're not choosing the right? Like we're not going down the right paths. But that's the only reason. And yes, it could happen. But if I sit there, keep thinking about it, then it's only increasing the possibility of that happening. And my kids taught me that.
So you're somebody that gets pulled in a lot of directions. You have, all these great friendships and brotherhood and your spouse and your kids and your work. Do you ever just get to the point where there's not any more Andrew to give?
No, because I think that life is really an endurance sport. I think that the more times your patience is tested, the more patience you have. And I think that we shut ourselves down more often than not. We say, I'm tired, I'm old. I used to tell my wife, I hate doing home improvement. I don't want to do this. And now I'm doing home improvement like every weekend because I've come to love it. Right. Mm-hmm. And I think if you reflect upon your life, there's a lot of things that you didn't like before that now you've learned to like over time, And I think that that's what I kind of view this stage of life as is I've just got to be tougher. I've just got to do it more. And the more I do it, the easier it becomes. So I'm not perfect at it, actually. Like I'm actually really far from it. Like for example, balancing tonight, trying to be here on time and also taking care of the other things that I wanted to do. I'm often trying to cram too much in.
Yeah.
Right. But I'd rather have that mistake than the opposite, which is I'm always going to have plenty of time to do everything I planned for today. Mm-hmm. That's like the lesser of two evils for me. So I would rather be here late and be here and have this time than say, hey, well, I'm going to be pushing it here. And that's a fault. That's definitely something I need to work on. But it's, again, the lesser of two evils mentality, right? One of my favorite quotes right now, and it has been for a while, is a Clarence Thomas quote. It says, "Old man Kant is dead. I helped bury him." Right? Like, I'm still in the helping part. I'm still trying to figure out how to bury Kant. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
But I like that saying because, we can actually handle a lot more than we give ourselves credit for, even as we get older.
Yes.
And one of my biggest fears in life is I look at these people who all they want to do is retire. I just want to retire. I just want to be to where I'm retired and do what for 30 years?
Yeah, it sounds miserable.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I don't want to retire. I want to be secure. and then I want to go work where I want to work. But I hope I never retire. And you asked about my in-laws. I would have a really hard time moving from the house I live in now. Even if I had millions of dollars expendable income to go build this mansion, I don't think I could move, because in every single room of that house is something my grandpa Tom has built. And it's if it's cabinets or floors he put in, whatever, but he's an old man, and he just can't stop.
Yeah.
But then you look at his brothers, who all retired at the same time as him, and they're all getting old and dying because he just works. He just keeps working. I don't know.
Yeah, I think when we have these, self-doubts and negative thoughts and stuff, I think a lot of times it's just us convincing ourselves of something. You almost convince yourself that you're tired, or you're getting old, or all these things. When on the other hand, I guess the other option is that we live our lives with intent. We're not led, we lead our lives.
Yeah.
I've observed you. I feel like you do lead your life with intent. What drives you? What motivates you to pursue all these different interests and business ventures? And
pride, probably. I used to really want to prove people wrong. I wanted to prove everyone wrong. I could care less now. I just want to have a good life. I don't care so much about the, hey, I'm going to be on this magazine. I'm going to be so wealthy and you're going to regret it. I don't have those feelings anymore. I used to for a long time. I wanted my biological dad. I didn't know that my dad, that I have the last name, Goodwin, is not my biological last name. I didn't know that until I was 11 years old. I found out when I was on my 11th birthday, my stepdad threatened to tell me if my mom didn't. So on the morning of my 11th birthday, they told me he's not your dad. And then when I was 18, I met my real dad, my biological dad. And he pretty much, didn't really want me. I think that for me, during that time, I really wanted to prove something. I really wanted to be like, okay, you wanted me, I'll show you what I'm worth.
Yeah.
Kind of a thing, right?
I don't know how you wouldn't have that reaction at first.
Yeah. But I think the important thing is how do you evolve out of that, right? And now I look at it and I'm like, look, I think it's great to have money. It's just not something you take with you. I think it's great to have money so that you can spend more time with the people you love, and have more fun. My mom, she said something to me. She's like, well, when you have nice things, then you'll get it. Cause my mom's wealthy. And she's never helped me with my businesses or anything. She's never invested. She's never really tried to help me. I've had to find other investors, to help me get going. And, but she's extremely wealthy. And she says, well, maybe when you have nice things, you'll get it. I'm like, Mom, I literally own a $90,000 boat, and I lend it out, and it sunk. It sunk. My uncle was driving it and he sunk it. He forgot to put the cap in.
The plug, yeah.
And he calls me and he's like, hey man, I'm really sorry. And I'm like, cool. It's just a boat. Yeah, I don't want to lose it. I'm glad you're taking care of what you damaged. But at the end of the day, a boat is just a tool to get my family together.
Yeah.
And I think we have a really hard time remembering that, and to answer your question, about that, I just think that what motivates me now is I want the security that my family's okay. And I want to be able to spend time with them and do that. And so I push for that reason. Right. But really, I also do it because I love it. I like the challenge. I like being uncomfortable and learning to overcome that,
Yeah.
And I think I like it because, again, pride. I think I look around at other people and say, you couldn't do this, but I can. I could handle this. If you threw me out into the desert, I'd survive. Whereas some of you guys would lay down. And I look at life that way. I think I constantly am waking up saying, how can I make my life harder today? But I just think it's really worth it. And it actually brings up a thought that you just had. in my mind is one thing I've been really trying to understand is this winner's mindset, right? This fearless, people talk about being fearless, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that I was completely wrong in what that meant for the first half of my life. And it's been really eye-opening for me the last couple of months to really try and learn that, this positive, this being fearless mentality.
You caught me off guard because you're the guy that rides bullet bikes and jumps off cliffs and stuff.
Yeah.
What do you mean by fearless then?
So that's what I mean.
You seem pretty fearless.
Yeah. Well, see, that's what I mean. So I used to think that fearless was the guy that would run into battle without fear, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or would jump off of a cliff or something like this. Like I used to just always be that way. I wasn't afraid of the consequences.
Yeah.
What I've realized is being fearless is actually not that in some ways, right? So what I've expanded of my understanding of being fearless is I was afraid in certain elements of my life, whether it be I was afraid of feeling defeat, right? So I was avoiding situations to where I would feel that emotion. And maybe you didn't see that on the outside of me because it looks like I'm taking all these risks, right? But every time I jumped off a cliff, I'd walk up to it on my snowmobile. I'd make a snowball and throw it off, and I'd be like, "That's about where I'm going to land." And I learned these tricks to make myself secure in what I was going to do. I had 100% confidence in my abilities. And so I knew I could go do these crazy things and be fearless, but it was because I knew I could. Okay. But one thing that I've really struggled with is, like, for example, you jump a snowmobile off of a cliff. You know you're going to probably land it if you've done it before. You know what your limits are,
yeah,
and you can stay within them.
Mm-hmm.
But then you go and like play basketball, for example. I'll give you an example. And if you're logical, you know that you're going to miss 50% of those shots, right? Well, for me, 50% hurts. The way my mindset works.
Mm-hmm.
The way my mindset works is I don't like that ratio. And so I would actually got to the point where I was constantly saying stuff like logical thoughts, like you haven't practiced enough shooting basketball because you don't have time because you're doing all these other things. And so you're probably going to miss this. Right. And so I would go and I would miss it. Right. I would go miss that shot. And I was constantly thinking these things. I would say something like, well, if I practiced, I'd be good. Okay. And I realized that I was watching a video about Larry Bird. And he walked into the 3-point competition and he looked at everyone else in the room and he says, I just want to know who's going to take second. Mm-hmm. Okay. Multiple times this man would walk up to his opponents and he would say, okay, I'm just fixing to bust a 3 on you guys and go home. I'm going to run to that spot on the floor and I'm going to shoot a 3 over you and I'm going to win this game. And I used to think to myself, wow, how cool would it be to be so good at something that I knew I could make that shot? But I had a realization in the last couple months. He didn't know he was going to make that shot. He could have just as easily missed it. And then the thought came to me, I wonder how often he did miss those shots, but he was still talking. He was still saying things like that in his head.
Yeah.
Right? Or even out loud to other players. But no one remembers that. No one remembers the times that he was wrong. It's not like he was 100% right on the court. Right? But that's what we talk about. That's what we remember. And so what I realized is that being fearless is doing something because it's the right thing, regardless of the consequence. In other words, you shoot a shot because you're open and you believe that it's going to go in because you tell yourself it's going to. And if it doesn't, it doesn't, and move on. That's fearless. That's the new version of fearless that I'm learning is, look, I'm going to go out there and give it my best, and win, lose, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do the right things at the right time. And that to me is a lot harder to do than being fearless in the sense that, like, I know it's morally right for me to run in and try and save this person. That's an easy decision. I can have no regrets in that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a lot harder when it comes to, when you keep failing at something, to keep telling yourself positively. So what I've learned is, for me, at least, one thing I'm really working on is how much your thoughts affect how you're feeling. If you just tell yourself, man, I'm fat, you're probably not going to get the motivation to be fit. Yeah. I mean, we all know that guy that literally can't think a negative thought about himself and has no right being positive with himself. Like, literally is terrible at sports, but he thinks he's the best.
Yeah.
And we all secretly hate him because he makes more shots than he should. You know what I mean? But isn't there a lesson in there somewhere?
Yeah. I think it's freakishly easy to be mediocre in today's world.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be easy to get caught up in that mindset and get comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But being fearless is very uncomfortable.
It is.
But it's that consistency of making those decisions that sparks the change.
Yeah.
So I really like that concept. I'm gonna have to write that down in my notes.
Yeah. I just, for me, it's just been like, it's tough to lose 50 times, but keep telling yourself, okay, the next time I'm going to win, but man,
it's very hard,
but that's a talent. I mean, that's something we have to work on. I mean, tell yourself you're valuable every day.
Yeah.
Say, I'm good at this. I'm good at this. I'm good at this. And eventually you will be good at it, even if you aren't,
Yeah. That self-talk, man, I've been trying to work on that the last year, and it's hard, but it's another thing where if you're consistent and you have this positive self-talk, let's say 5 years from now, I'm consistent with that, where am I going to be?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's what gets me excited.
Yeah.
But yeah, just having a consistent positive self-talk, like, throughout the day, it can be so hard because the self-doubts creep in, but there's certain tools, this podcast helps a lot, and our belief system helps a lot, but yeah, it's something that I'm definitely trying to work on.
Yeah. I'd even say, I'm not a huge believer in goals, mostly because I think you should know what you want already, and I think you should be working towards it every day.
Yeah.
And I think if you have to write something down to get you all pumped up for 30 seconds until you forget tomorrow, I think that's rough. So I get that a lot of people totally believe in goals, and I'm great with that. I'm glad it works for you guys. It just doesn't work for me.
Mm-hmm.
But something I can do every day is positive self-thought.
Yeah.
Awesome. And that's, I don't know. I think that could really help a lot of people. It helps. And practice it in every element of your life. I mean, how stupid is it that I'm sitting out there, before a pickleball point, taking a breath and saying, okay, center yourself, focus, and go hit the shot, even though you just missed the last one. Just go commit to it and hit that shot.
It's that goldfish mentality, 10-second memory.
Yeah. And committing to that full force and saying, okay, I'm going to go out there, even though I just hit one deep, I'm going to go hit one again. And if it goes deep again, who cares?
Yeah.
I don't care. I don't care as long as it's the right thing.
We talked a little bit earlier. You kind of have this concept, or you explained how you've evolved as a person. I really like that. I feel like, well, the other night, my friend from high school, I haven't talked to since high school, messaged me on Facebook, and he's like, dude, give me a call if you have time right now. And I'm like thinking, like, what does he need? Does he need something? Does he want to talk about something? So I called him immediately. And in that conversation, we were just chatting about high school and stuff. And I was like, dude, I'm so different than Jace Kelly 13 years ago, 12 years ago. Mm-hmm. And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, oh, well, this and this has happened. I just feel like a totally different person. And after the call, I'm like, is that good or bad? Like, how do I feel about that? And just talking with you, I think it's because I've just evolved, and it is a positive thing. Mm-hmm. It's interesting to think, like, if we continue on this route, where we'll be in 10, 20 years, how much good we can do, but it can also go the opposite way.
Yeah, I think, I read a book recently about Andre Agassi, tennis player. And it was a good book. It was a really good book. I liked it. But there was one thing that I thought was really interesting about that book and his dad made him hit, and I could be wrong on the numbers, but I think it was like 2,250 balls a day on the machine when he was young. Never took him to any clinics. Like, at least they don't mention it in the book, right? But what he did every day when he first started playing tennis was just hit the ball over and over and over and over and over and over again, right? And so his dad said, the reason why I had that number in my head is because then if he hit him every day for a year, he would have hit 1 million tennis balls. And he did that. And then he immediately goes and wins his first tournament after that, after a year of that. And to me, that's an interesting concept, because I sit here and I worry about my form. I worry about, am I doing this right? Am I doing that right? Is everything perfect before I move forward? And I think life is a lot about just getting the reps, but recognizing them as reps instead of running away and saying, man, I don't want to see this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. Change, get those reps, learn from those mistakes. So much now we hear these kids that are like, well, I'm 18 years old. Give me everything. It's like, you haven't earned anything. You barely graduated from high school. I mean, congratulations, you got a 4.0. That's not hard to do. And there's some other kids, by the way, that got 2.0s that are smarter than you.
They might be your boss in a few years.
Yeah. So that doesn't matter, but it's just like, well, I'm worth $35 an hour. It's like, I think you're worth more than that, but not right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. But only if you're willing to change, man. Just take the time.
Yeah. Tell me so on the podcast, we talk about the trials and triumphs of being a father. Uh-huh. Tell me a triumph.
Oh man, I would just have to say their character. I am really proud of who my kids are, how they treat others, things they stand up for, but most of all, just their work ethic and their ability to just be good people. I'm proud of that. I'm proud of who they'll be. They'll be all the best versions of me.
That's all we really want, right? As dads.
Yeah. Right.
So just to wrap up the podcast, I ask this question on every episode, and that is, if there's one lesson you want to leave with your kids when you're no longer here, what is that lesson?
I want my kids to do the right, even if because it feels right to them. I always say, one of my other favorite sayings is, George Washington wasn't a hero when he was alive. Christ wasn't a hero when he was alive. He was hated. He was killed, Yeah. And I hope my kids can do that. I hope they can have the internal fortitude to choose the right, even if everyone else disagrees, to follow their hearts and that means, again, I hope that's the truth thing, because you see a lot of people going in the wrong direction with that. Even that thought, they'll twist. But what I mean is, find what's right and be that. That's what I wish my kids would do. I hope they will, just live, love, and even if people hate you, just love them, But I'd say that would be my goal. I hope that they're strong enough to know what they're worth.
Awesome. I love it. Well, thanks for being on, sharing your thoughts and insights and stories. I really appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me.
Cool.